Welcome back to Better MMA. We are coming back at you guys with our picks and predictions for every single fight for UFC Fight Night. Burns versus Brady going down this Saturday night. We're going to jump right into it with the main event, Gilbert Durinho Burns versus Sean Brady. Now, this is a very interesting matchup because this is most definitely Sean Brady's opportunity to push himself into the top 5 picture. Gilbert Durinho Burns, as we know, has been a mainstay of the top echelon of the welterweight division for quite some time, and they pose a very interesting challenge for each other. Sean Brady is going to go into this fight, look to wrestle, and look to gain a decision, mostly by dominant top pressure and attempting submissions from the top. Gilbert Durinho Burns, I'm sure, will try some submissions off of his back, be that arm bars or scrambles to try and take Sean Brady's back. But where I see Gilbert Burns really having an advantage here is on the feet, especially in the 3rd, 4th, and 5th round. Sean Brady, in his fight with Belal Muhammad, showed a real inability to deal with the boxing pressure and hand speed that Belal Muhammad showed him. After Sean Brady got hurt, it really seemed like he was disoriented and didn't know how to bring himself back into the fight. And I think Gilbert Burns has a big advantage in this fight when it comes to the intensity that he has in the pocket with his strikes. So though Sean Brady could get a wrestling-based decision here, I'm going to have to go with Gilbert Burns getting a 3rd or 4th round TKO. Moving on to the co-main event of the evening, Jessica Andrade versus Natalia Silva. I'm going to have to go with Natalia Silva in this fight because even though Jessica Andrade is the bigger name, there has been a blueprint made on how to beat Jessica Andrade, and this is both in the Yan Xiaonan and Zhang Weili fights. Jessica Andrade gets herself knocked out by rushing in and following her opponents rather than tracking them down methodically with her footwork. I'm sure Natalia Silva will be able to catch Andrade throughout the fight when she is rushing in, and Natalia Silva in her own right is a very talented fighter, both in her striking and on the ground. I don't think Jessica Andrade necessarily has the skill set to absolutely outclass Natalia Silva, so I'm going to go with Natalia Silva getting a dominant 3-round decision or a flash KO in the 1st round. Moving on to Kyle Nelson versus Steve Garcia. Now, this is the people's main event. Myself and many others are very, very excited for this fight because it's really going to decide which of these two men is going to get propelled into the top 10 picture of the UFC featherweight division. Steve Garcia is on a 4-fight KO streak right now, so there's a lot of hype behind his name. He is 32 years old, in the prime of his career. Kyle Nelson is 33 years old, and these guys have a very tall, similar frame for the featherweight division. So both of these guys are in the prime of their career. I do think Kyle Nelson has a grappling advantage in this fight. So if he looks to clinch up Steve Garcia early and take this fight to the ground, I think Kyle Nelson is a great pick to win this fight. If Kyle Nelson can slow this fight down in the clinch and begin to wrestle Steve Garcia, it will make the wild striking exchanges that are forced by Steve Garcia to be much more manageable if Kyle Nelson can take away some of the speed and pop in Steve Garcia's arms and his shots. But I think Steve Garcia is going to be too relentless with the pressure, and as we saw in Kyle Nelson's fight with Billy Quarantillo, Kyle Nelson does get broken down by pressure. So as long as Steve Garcia stays within Kyle Nelson's face, keeps Kyle Nelson on the back foot, and keeps landing solid punches, Steve Garcia should be able to melt and get the knockout over Kyle Nelson. I would say either in the 1st or 2nd round, but this should be a banger of a fight, and I'm looking forward to it. Moving on to Matt Schnell versus Cody Durden. Cody Durden is taking this fight on extremely short notice, and I think this is a mistake for Cody Durden. Cody Durden was knocked out bad by Bruno Silva not even a month and a half ago. So it's a very quick turnaround from Cody Durden, and I think he's greatly underestimating Matt Schnell in this matchup. Matt Schnell, though he is coming off of a very, very bad knockout loss to Steve Erceg, that fight took place just over 6 months ago. So Matt Schnell has given his head a good time to rest and a good time to recover. Cody Durden, on the other hand, has not been doing that. And not only do I think Matt Schnell might have an ability to clip Cody Durden because Cody Durden does not have the best head movement, but Matt Schnell is an extremely underrated Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu specialist. Matt Schnell's best part of his game is his jiu-jitsu. And Cody Durden, as we know, is an All-American wrestler, and he will lean on that wrestling as the fight goes on. I think if Matt Schnell can make it ugly on the feet, he can make it a bad time for Cody Durden on the feet, and he gets Cody Durden tired and shooting for desperation takedowns, Matt Schnell will be able to cinch up a guillotine or a triangle choke, and I'm going to go with Matt Schnell getting the submission here. A lot of people are underestimating him and pushing him to the side since he's gotten a lot of KO losses on his record, and that's what we've seen of him recently. But Cody Durden does not necessarily have the most elite fight IQ, and there are a lot of vulnerabilities from a stylistic perspective where Matt Schnell could take advantage of Cody Durden. So I'm going to go with Matt Schnell getting the submission, and we are moving on to Yanal Ashmouz versus Trevor Peek. Yanal Ashmouz is a very heavy-handed fighter. I'm actually expecting Trevor Peek to get knocked down in this fight. I think a lot of people are going to be shocked because Trevor Peek has such a wild style and a tough, gritty chin. But Yanal Ashmouz has some very good power, and he knows how to place an overhand right on his opponents. So I'm looking for Yanal Ashmouz to get the knockdown in this fight. Trevor Peek is a madman when he's in the octagon, throwing wild shots with no technique from all sorts of angles. But it is the heart and the grit that he has which wears down on his opponents. I'm expecting Trevor Peek to lose the first round. Most likely he gets knocked down, but I think Trevor Peek is going to pick it up and really test Ashmouz's cardio and his will in the second and third rounds, and I think Trevor Peek will pull away with a unanimous decision. Moving on to Rong Zhu versus Chris Padilla. Now, Chris Padilla is an underdog in this matchup, and I do not understand why. Chris Padilla had his UFC debut short notice against James Lontop, and Chris Padilla looked absolutely phenomenal, getting some very good takedowns and then submitting James Lontop on the ground. Rong Zhu comes from Asia, where there is not the best competition on the regional scenes, and even in the fights that we have seen from Rong Zhu, he is very, very hittable, and it is easy to take him down. I think this is a perfect fight for Chris Padilla to really display his skill set against a guy with a seemingly very good record in Rong Zhu, who is 25-5, but I think Chris Padilla is either going to get a dominant decision or he will get the submission in the second round. Moving on to Isaac the Midwest Choppa Dalgarian versus Brandon Marotte. Now, there's not much to say about this fight because Isaac Dalgarian is a massive favorite. Isaac Dalgarian is a phenomenal wrestler with some very, very nasty ground and pound. Brandon Marotte is decent everywhere, but not very good anywhere. So Isaac Dalgarian should have a good advantage in the wrestling department, and he will take down Brandon Marotte, most likely get a submission in the first round. Moving on to Andre Lima versus Felipe Dos Santos. Another banger on this card. Andre Lima has a very exciting fighting style. He's a well-rounded fighter, and as we know, Felipe Dos Santos is like the flyweight Charles Oliveira. He's got the shoot-a-box, walk-you-down type of style. Though he does get hit quite a lot, Felipe Dos Santos is durable, and he has a gas tank. Andre Lima, I think, has the skill set to put out Felipe Dos Santos, whether it's on the feet or get a submission, but Andre Lima does not like getting pressured. We saw that in his fight with Igor Severino, and I think the shoot-a-box camp is smart enough to know where Andre Lima does not like to be in the fight, and I'm sure they can look for some opportunities where Felipe Dos Santos could finish the fight. It's going to be a very, very close fight, and I'm sure it will be a war, but I'm going to have to go with Felipe Dos Santos getting the decision. Moving on to Gabriel Santos versus Yi Zha. I'm going to have to go with Gabriel Santos. Gabriel Santos seems like the more natural fighter of the two. Yi Zha, though he does have some good technique, you don't really see him meshing together the wrestling and the striking or the clinch work very well. It seems like he's very robotic when he's in the cage, and I don't like when fighters are so robotic because it allows somebody with a more fluid fighting style to really take advantage of them, and I think that's exactly what Gabriel Santos is going to do in this fight. I think he's going to be more loose and relaxed than Yi Zha. I think he's going to light up Yi Zha on the feet and most likely take his back and get a submission in the first or second round. Moving on to Jacqueline Amorim versus Vanessa Demopoulos. I'm going to have to go with Vanessa Demopoulos. I know a lot of people are going with Jacqueline Amorim because she is a good, talented fighter, but I think Vanessa Demopoulos knows what the judges want to see, that being activity, and I think she will be more active than Jacqueline Amorim, and Vanessa Demopoulos will get a 3-round decision. Moving on to Andre Petrosky versus Dylan Budka. Now, I'm going to have to go with Andre Petrosky in this fight, simply off the fact that Dylan Budka seems like a younger, less mature version of Andre Petrosky. Now, Andre Petrosky is a pretty limited fighter in his own right. He's mainly just a wrestler with a very, very small striking skill set, and Dylan Budka is essentially the same thing, where he has good wrestling and essentially no striking skill set. So I think Andre Petrosky should be the better, more mature grappler. And on top of that, Andre Petrosky should have the better striking. So I'm going to go with Andre Petrosky getting a 3-round decision. Moving on to the card opener. Nathan Fletcher versus Zygmantas Ramaska. I wanted to try and pronounce that name, and I think I did a pretty good job at it my first try. Zygmantas Ramaska, I'm going to have to go with him in this fight. He used to be a lightweight. He is fighting at featherweight in this fight. Nathan Fletcher, in his fights, tends to be a little bit too methodical, where you could really see him thinking when he needs to be doing. A lot in the same way that Yi Jia doesn't know how to flow from one thing to the next. I see Nathan Fletcher having that same problem. And Ramaska, on the other hand, is a very, very aggressive fighter on the feet. So I think he will be overpowering Nathan Fletcher on the feet. And when it gets to the ground, he should match the skill set of Nathan Fletcher. So I'm going to go with Zygmantas Ramaska getting a 3-round decision. Well, those were the picks, guys. I hope you like my predictions. I recently got sick, so I hope my voice wasn't too unbearable in this video. I appreciate you guys sticking around. Please leave a comment and like the video if you enjoyed it. I'm very curious to know your guys' thoughts. Please subscribe to Better MMA. We appreciate it. We out. Peace.